Thanks for coming and for trickling in. And we'll just dive right in. I hope I can prove that I'm a dependency addicted moron, or maybe not. 2024 was, in my mind, a little bit the year of Packwerk retrospectives, big and small. Early in the year, we had Gannon from Shopify write a pretty long article about the Packwerk retrospective. We had Eileen later in the year give the talk at Rails World about the myth of the modular monolith, and maybe smaller. But Brandon had a series of posts about modularity, its problems. At some point during one of these things coming out, I got a message. This is the final nail in the coffin for Packwerk. And in fact, I was at dinner yesterday, and another speaker, Alan, who was this morning talking about how at Meraki they've been working on improving the structure of their code base. He said, oh yeah, after Eileen's talk, I was like, oh yeah, we're not going to use Packwerk. So maybe for like some people, that was right. But ever since then, I thought I should be doing some retrospecting too. Hi, I'm Stephan. I work for Gusto. I lead a team we call Developer Productivity. That's a whole bunch of stuff spanning all the way from TypeScript to GraphQL, Kafka, and includes Rails. And also one team we still call Modularity. And the reason I called this talk Why Packwerk Can't Save Your Messy Rails App, but you can. No, actually, I don't know why I called it that, but we'll figure it out as we go along. But the reason I wanted to do a retrospective is because I've talked about Packwerk, I've written a book about Packwerk, and together with that team that I just mentioned, we've written a whole bunch of tools that add to, build on top of, and even replace Packwerk. So I'll do a quick intro and I'll do a speed run over some of that stuff. Packwerk on a slide. You add a gem, there we go, dependency addicted. You add a gem, Packwerk, or PKS. You mark folders as a package by adding a package YAML file into that folder. You selectively using that file, you can say, I want to enforce dependencies for that package. You can then accept some dependencies to that package onto other packages by saying so in that same file. And then you see any other dependencies that you haven't accepted as so-called violations. This is in a nutshell why Packwerk can't save your Rails app. That's literally all it does. So we've built a ton of stuff around it because we felt that there was a lot more to this core idea. And while I'm joking about the fact that this is all it does, this is truly all it does, but there's a lot of you can do with that idea. So just a speed run through some of the ways that we've expanded on that first idea. We've added new enforcement types. Privacy is a way to enforce what the boundary is that you talk to, or the publicly accessible boundary. Visibility, a package can say who should be able to be talking to it. Folder privacy, if you nest packages, you can say something about which sibling, or that only siblings should be seeing content of that package. Layers, a way to say there's a list of layers and they sit on top of each other, and you basically identify every package as being in a layer, and then you prevent access going up the layer stack. A bunch of other stuff. PKS is a Rust implementation of Packwerk. It's a bunch faster. It contains all these extensions, and it solves one limitation that is around autoloading that's in Packwerk. We have packs. That is a Rails-like structure, so it's basically then comes for free for packages. Packs Rails makes those packs loading into a Rails application in no-op. You just throw this in there, and then those things get loaded for you. Code ownership is a gem so that we don't have to mess with the GitHub code owners file directly. One of the features of it is to define package ownership or ownership by package. You can integrate the whole thing into Danger so you can get feedback on PRs and make comments. Query Packwerk, Brandon mentioned this morning in his talk about AI. Bunch of ways of querying the capabilities and basically trying to understand what is the nature of violations. And then, I have one more. Visualize packs is a way to kind of show the structure of the packages and the status of violations within the application. And because I now mentioned multiple of the talks from this morning. There's one more thing, which is, I'm going to actually ask Martin to come up. Welcome, Martin.
Working? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so apparently Brandon talked about something, and I missed his talk. I'm really sorry, Brandon, but it sounded like what he talked about is something that Gusto was working on earlier, which is called Chatwork, which allows AI agents to access that query Packwerk information and make use of it. So it does a really good job of expressing the boundaries between the packs to agents in a way that makes it a lot more useful. So we just open sourced that between Brandon's talk and now. And so you can go check it out on the Ruby at Scale GitHub org.
Yep.
Thank you, Stephan.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, so that happened. We had been sitting on it for too long, apparently. So we still, and maybe this is the retrospective slide, right? I was saying I was doing some retrospective. So we still use Packwerk and friends at Gusto. We use PKS mostly. We have a mix of all the enforcement types that I just talked about. We use it to draw out, this is a very good use case, to draw out and protect potential gems that we're not quite ready to extract, but that we already want to separate off. We communicate what we call the future state of services. We have multiple fairly large monoliths, and within that we are actually quite convinced that there are certain applications that we can and will extract. And so we're actually using the tooling of Packwerk to basically indicate this quite strongly, that there is a service there and that we're going to try to at least not make it worse, or if we're actively working on it, make it better. We're actually using it also to extract services, because you get information about dependencies and what code is used, so you can see a lot of the stuff that you have to fix in order to be able to extract a service. And in conjunction with all this, we have a dedicated service extraction effort where teams are committed to extracting different kinds of applications from all over Gusto's product domain. But back to these retrospectives. I want to go over some of the themes, and then I want to go to some of the conclusions, and we'll see what we'll do with it. And the timer is not working. So I don't know time. If someone wants to hand me a phone so I can see the time, I'll figure it out. Okay, so Gannon's, Eileen's, and Brandon's retrospectives, and then my opinions. So first one, non-autoloaded files get missed by Packwerk, hiding real dependencies. So I was saying Packwerk works by using actually site work to understand constants in the application, and then it uses constant references to basically say a constant is in a package and a reference constitutes a dependency between two packages, and that creates the graph, and we can interrogate this. If you only use site work, you miss anything that's not auto-loaded. This is true and is a problem because you miss a whole bunch of stuff, right? PKS fixes a lot of this because instead of using site work, it simply parses all the files and just extracts all the constants, so it can see a ton more gems, stuff in initializers, anything truly, except for you pass around strings, you constantize them, you can't see that. So it's still best effort, but you can fix a lot of this particular limitation. Privacy checks created architectural debt. And I should say these are kind of what I extract as the highlights from these retrospectives. You should go watch or read them yourself. I hope I'm not doing them a disservice by trying to extract some things. I'm trying to represent some of the highlights as I see them. We've seen this too. Privacy enforcement is tough. So you enforce privacy for a package, you come across a violation, what's the next thing you're going to do? You're like, oh, I can't have a violation, so I'm going to take the thing and put it into the public API. If that thing is not a good thing to have in the public API, then you just create an API that you're not going to like down the road. So in that sense, it's very easy if you naively fix without question by just simply making everything that creates any violation a thing that goes in the public API. Well, notice what you just did. You're not designing a public API. The public API is happening to you by all the stuff that you're going to put in there. And eventually, you might be accumulating the whole package in the public API. Clearly not the intent. It's not going to work out well. It's difficult. Package boundaries create bad dependency structures. This is a slightly different variation, more focused on dependencies. But at some point, Eileen in her talk says, oh, and then you're moving files around for years. I actually think we're still moving files around. The act of moving files around feels not so good, but it is also the act of trying to, over time, learn, refine, change your opinion about which parts of the code base actually constitute parts that you want to think about in isolation. But if you create package structures, i.e. you put stuff into packages where you later realize I want to change it, if you do not make that change, then I have to say yes, undesirable package boundaries will lead to undesirable outcomes. So if you're going down this road of trying to improve the application structure, that is the path that you're on. I think I have 6 of these, by the way. Technical modularity didn't solve any real pain points. Tight coupling, flaky CI, difficult onboarding. This is very true. Tight coupling in a Rails application predominantly comes from active record models being just all entangled with themselves. And so this is very true in the sense that you can't fix that kind of entanglement quickly. I think the fair analysis, though, is if I had to guess for Gusto how much time or developer years we've been able to invest in trying to improve the structure versus all the developer years we've been putting into building all the things without maybe thinking so much about the structure, my hunch is that's in the single digit percentage. My hunch is that that's, despite all the work that Shopify has put in, my hunch would be that's the same. They have a fairly big Rails team, but they have a massive developer organization. And so if we say, let's say it's 5%, if I look across our code base, there is a small percentage of things that are way better. I already mentioned the gems. There are certain parts of the application. So this is predominantly true, but maybe it's just actually commensurate with the size of the effort. So it's just hard to make progress on this. Violation lists ever grew, my number 5. We were in the state as well. You get all these new tools, it's very easy to throw all this stuff in. It's very easy to turn all these enforcements on. It's very easy to create these long lists of violations and to then say, we're going to fix them, and then you kind of go back and you build your feature and don't do it. And when you're in that situation, right, if there is already a path that has a violation from one package to another, what stands to reason as you're building more advanced features, you're probably going to have to do that again in other places. So what are you doing? You're accumulating violations. So this can be painful, and the learning over time is that you actually have to decide what to enforce, where, when, and why. If you don't do that, then you're appeasing the tool, right? And that's not going to help you in the long run. I think my final one, domain-based packaging conflicted with functional realities. This is a domain like Shopify, so I think this is from Eileen's talk. In that sense, I would say like the Gusto domain is payroll, taxes, filing of stuff. Shopify has this too with taxes and so forth. You have these conflicting options of trying to organize things around workflows, or you're like, oh, this is a so-and-so domain. And they collide with each other. And so on this one, yes, this stuff's hard. So I would say, yes, drawing useful boundaries is difficult and takes learning and iteration to get right. So those are some of the highlights as I see them and my positioning against them. I want to give you some conclusions that I believe these articles in the talk that they come to kind of cue up the rest of this discussion. So Gannon has a sentence in there, Packwerk is a sharp knife and it must be wielded with care. Eileen at some point says, right, it's about hiring. We cannot keep hiring developers and failing to train them on how to write Rails the Rails way. If we don't train new hires on why we use Rails, how to write Rails, how to organize code, how to write tests, how to use the features of the framework and sharp knives again, how to avoid sharp knives, how to follow Rails conventions, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Eileen's talk has so much content, I want to give another one, which is about the myth of the modular monolith, which is that architecture cannot fix human and culture problems, but maybe fixing human and culture problems can improve architectural, operational, and organizational challenges. And then I'm going to include Brandon here as well, who I think summarizes a very similar idea in saying modularity is not a technical issue, it is a social, incentives, organizational, and educational issue. So, what does this all mean for you? A quick show of hands, actually. Who here is a director, thought leadering person, people manager? Okay. And who, on the other hand, is like hands-on code, developer? Okay, so the predominant majority. And in the last group, anyone feeling slightly disempowered by these conclusions. Okay, there's a hand in the back, thank you for playing. I do want to notice, you have to fix the incentives organization, fix hiring, fix or organizational setup. Maybe not your job? Seems odd to me. Were all of these messages just directed at top levels of engineering leadership? So, what's the takeaway then when we read these, right? Don't use Packwerk because it's a sharp knife? Well, how are we going to learn to use that thing, or anything for that matter? So let's talk about hammers. We start teaching kids, actually no, we don't start teaching kids. Hammers are most definitely involved in the making of the thing on the left as well as in the making of the thing on the right, and gosh, I hope that there's some screws in the thing on the right, but I still don't want to step on it. So we start teaching kids about hammers when they're about 9 months old. As my extensive research has shown, you smack this thing and it makes a sound. A little bit older, you get a wooden thing and you can smack pegs through a board. A little bit older, you can smack a thing and you make music. A little bit older, you smack frogs and you get a counter. A little bit older, you smack balls into a ball run and you do the same thing in wood. A little bit older, you don't smack frogs, you smack gophers. But because everything costs money, now you have to put coins in it. Later, this gets really interesting for the parents because you have to clean this up at night. Now we introduce nails, so smack those into a corkboard. A little bit older, this is a very good step. Real tools, so you can put the kids to work. Real tools to smack real nails into presumably real things. These are all child size, by the way. We can do the branding, so you can immediately think yourselves of being in the trades. But here's the ultimate kind of, here's a bunch of wood, go to town. Build it yourself. For some reason, this is very interesting, in adolescence, it goes off the rails. Foam, don't know what this is, and I'm not sure anyone learned hammering from this. Then it comes slightly back, because then you come out of school and maybe you want to do carpentry, and then you can go to a union, you can do an apprenticeship, or if you don't want to do that, you could go to a trade school and learn carpentry there. Yes, and then there's YouTube, because if we don't do that, holy shit, there is so many videos about how to wield a hammer. It is quite awesome, actually. Yes, so hammering is not the only thing that's going to make the left be different than that thing on the right, but it's a part of it, right? If you don't know how to wield a hammer, you can do neither. So what's the takeaway from this? Obviously, when the YouTube page is so long, there's a skill that's important. No, actually, at this point, I'm like, this is my 15-second rendition of Dave's talk, because this is about what you do when a nail is too long. You don't do this, because then you have this sharp edge here, but wait for it. Ooh, we can bend the nail, and then when we smack it, oh, now the nail's gone. So that's how nerdy just putting a nail into wood gets. So what's our hammer? What's our tool? Of course, we have a lot of tools in the language, in the framework, in GEMS. Packwerk is one such tool. It's one tool to do application architecture. This is basically also the takeaway of this talk in a photo. I want us to be able to, saying earlier, is this only directed at leadership? If leadership comes away from these talks with a particular opinion about how we're supposed to do this kind of work, and they have no clue what we're doing, but they're telling us we're doing it wrong, how comfortable are we to argue for working on better application architecture, and which tools to use for it? So let's try. We have functions, classes, modules, packs, gems, apps. Oh, misspelled it. Insert Dave's talk here, because the point I'm going to try to make is hearing Dave talk about it, he's like going super deep on different ideas for how to design any part of the application and getting a feel for how to do it right. Right? This is like oh, that's really cool. You can bend a nail over that thing so it goes in on itself. That feel applied to these different tools that we have to do application architecture allows us to show up differently in conversations. Now I have a timer. So I want to try this real quick. Dave did this way better, so I'm just going to kind of lead you through this. So we have the good house and the bad stairs, right? So good or bad. Anyone find this function to be nice or maybe not nice and have a strong opinion? There's too many folks speaking over there, so I'll do it for you. Like you could say, oh, I don't really love that these two very different things, charging customers and like updating inventory is like in one method. Maybe that works, but shouldn't they be split apart? I don't know. Here's a moron. The purchasing service, charge a customer, update stock. There's no instance variables here, so clearly we know it's wrong, but so that's the first thing. The second thing is like now it gets, why do I have to update the stock via the purchasing service? That seems not ideal. Let's try modules. Hope I can redeem myself. Purchasing, inventory. Anyone not like these? Actually, now I realize someone says something, but I can't hear it because of the outside conversation. But now it seems weird to me that update stock, when you give it a quantity, it reduces the stock. I feel like maybe update stock, that seems odd. Here's an attempt at a pack of the same thing. Charge service, stock service. I think that problem with the negation gets worse, but who doesn't love calling stock service parens? But you pass in a quantity and for some reason it reduces the inventory, like, But by the way, I have to speak to the last nail in the coffin. Of these different tools, and I'm being very naive in saying those are the tools to do application architecture. Of these different tools, Packwerk is the only one that it has learning an architecture and learning to do architecture kind of built in. If you have any modules in your code base, then you have some folders in there. You can literally just drop in these package YAML files and try to experiment with what is the relationship of these things. For any other of the changes that or for these methods, classes and whatnot that I just talked about, if you want to change them, you're shaping production code. Fundamentally, the infrastructure on Packwerk is a linter, right? So you're not touching it. So it's actually like, I would say, unique, continues to be unique, and will be unique with Rails 4, even if we have explicit imports, because you can play with application structure without having to touch it. You're going to touch it if you actually use it, but it's unique in that way. Sorry, but I digress. Here's an attempt at apps doing the same thing. We can split now apart two apps, the inventory app and the purchasing app. Anyone got any qualms with this one? The best one I can come up with here is, in an inventory app, I would probably not call the thing product, because who knows if it's a product. I have, I don't know, things that are in the inventory items, maybe. Not maybe products belongs into a different domain. So you see, we can knit at all these things, but the knit is also the start of having a conversation of what works, what's good, right? To be part of that conversation of what should we do to make things better. Take two, take away, final. It's my commit messages, by the way. If someone was like, oh yeah, it all depends, thank you for outing yourself as a consultant or a staff engineer, it's great. Of course it all depends, right? I gave you no context. Of course, these are terrible examples, and it does all depend. But if at any point you were like, oh, I have no idea, I'm not sure, then my pitch to you would be, there's a tool in your tool belt about which you're like, oh, I don't know that I have a really good opinion about how to do this. I'm not sure I would want to, oh, I didn't know you could bend the nail over the weird screwdriver or whatever that was. So, back to those retrospectives one more time. A retrospective is a reflection of a person or a group in a specific context, at a specific time, after some specific work, and if they didn't just come for the snacks, then to decide on some specific actions. So, what can you take away from these retrospectives? Including this one. Is it a surprise that Gannon, in his article, writes about trying to isolate a package that lives at the bottom of their stack and is like a dependency-free package. I think they call it framework. Right? And the retrospective speaks to the experiences of trying to do that. It's no surprise, to my understanding, Gannon at the time at least was a member of the Rails team that was working in that exact area of the application. Is it a surprise that, and she doesn't quite say it, but that Eileen in our talk at some point basically says you got to Rails a bit harder and then the application will be better? I don't think so. It's not a surprise. She's a Rails core team member. She's doing a ton of good work there, and I wouldn't blame her for an affinity to Rails. Is it a surprise that Brandon says, not a technical issue, but an organizational one? I had the pleasure of working with Brandon. He's super tuned into like what works in an org and what doesn't. And so, of course, it's not a surprise. Is it a surprise that this guy standing here on stage and is saying you should learn about how to do application architecture better when he also just told you that he has big monoliths that need a better application architecture? No, it's no surprise that I'm saying that. So these retros all come with very specific context. So, really, final takeaway. All tools create an opportunity for value creation, and all tools cost something, and you have to think through whether that trade-off is worth it for you. Actually, sorry, for real, this is my takeaway. Do not let others do the thinking for you. Please keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing. Thank you so much.